Alright, so now we're going into the balancing of the tenses and effective behaviours. Historical perspective. Like I suggested, if you find that you experience extreme emotions that you can't quite trace where they come from, or that the thing that you identify the emotion with seems to be a ridiculous source of such powerful emotions, you know what I mean? I don't know, the cat crapping on the bloody doorstep sends you into a day-long rage, or something along those lines, you know what I mean? Just a disproportionate response. If you can recognise that you have a disproportionate response, the chances are that you have some degree of this underlying trauma, or trauma, or, you know what I mean, sort of psychological damage due to historical events. And so identifying that you are no longer in the situation that had created the anxiety in the first place, or the depression in the first place, can be a very powerful and curative tool. If you are a victim of childhood paedophilia, while you may not be able to escape your nightmares of your unconscious mind, your conscious mind can go a very long way by simply identifying that you are no longer a child, and nobody is going to be abusing you or being violent to you like that ever again. Then we have so that sort of historical perspective, placing things in their correct order, in their correct hierarchies of importance, and their historical hierarchies of importance. Balancing of the tenses. I mentioned this on the last show. This is essentially that we all exist as a kind of smear across the future, the present, and the past. And our minds divide themselves between those three tenses, between the now, the next, and the then. And what I have keenly observed is that the hyperactive, the anxiolic, the compulsive tends to be very future oriented, and their intellectual processes are largely driven by considerations of future events, future possible events, desires, wishes, dreams, all these sort of things. And as a consequence, the future-oriented person doesn't experience the here and now like a balanced person, and almost never learns from the past, never learns from any historical mistakes. The past is so far abstracted from them because they're sort of 3 days in the future from where we're standing. With the depressive or the victim of abuse, then dwelling in the past, of constantly running over thoughts of things that have already been, again takes us away from the pleasure of the now, the direct experiential sensation of being human. And it also destroys our projected expectations, projected pleasant expectations into the future. And so it's entirely possible that purely by identifying within ourselves, or within our friends and neighbours who are suffering from these sort of problems, where they are on the balance of the tenses, and to simply encourage them to pay more attention to the tenses that you think that they're neglecting. And again, I have had great reports back that people have told me that this is an incredibly powerful therapeutic tool, and can completely organise one's ability to determine the necessity of pursuing a particular line of thought. That if you find yourself completely compelled to think about the past, then with this consideration you can then identify yourself as being past oriented, and you can make actions within your life to make yourself more in the moment, and also more observant of the future events coming down the pipe at you. Okay, effective behaviour. Garden cat therapy. Now you may think that no, Jack's just completely lost his mind. Some of you may already know what the hell garden cat therapy may be. Certainly you may have some inkling of who Garden Cat is. Garden Cat came to us several years ago. He arrived in our shed, a bedraggled, dreadlocked, flea-ridden, wormy, cat flu, abused, probably 6-month-old kitten at the time. And we had a cat of our own, so we couldn't invite him into the house, so I basically kept him in the shed. I kept a wood stove lit all winter, waking every 3 hours because it was a cracked wood stove and would always go out, so I'd go out there and throw a few more coals on there and give it a riddle and make sure it stayed lit, and basically kept him warm and fed and got him through this winter, and he recovered, and he has turned into quite a fine cat. But due to his incredibly hairy nature and his rather less than auspicious beginnings, he looks a little like an explosion in a cat factory. He looks like a cat that kind of has swallowed the stick of dynamite in the cartoon. And as a consequence, he's got a rather comedic appearance. And to accompany this kind of comedic appearance, his cat flu, we believe, has left him a little brain damaged, and he certainly isn't the most dainty of felines. His efforts to perch on the top of fences can just leave us all crying with laughter. The poor thing's persistent and repeated efforts to jump from the floor onto a fence and failing completely. But as a consequence, Garden Cat has become best loved amongst my son's friends group, and it was identified by one of them, I think, in the height of psychedelic fantasy, that it was impossible to be depressed and hold a thought of Garden Cat in your mind simultaneously. And as kind of comedic as that statement may sound, it again is an incredibly potent tool. That if you have a friend with a pet, or your own pet, or whatever, that just makes you smile inside, that the thought of that particular other sentient being fills you with some warmth, then you can use that as a tool. You can use that image. Sometimes I've heard psychiatrists telling people to go to their happy place. Well, I hate that. That just sounds so fucking new age and crap. But I hate to say it. Happy place is really what we're talking about here. So, you know what I mean? Anything that indisputably will spread a smile across your mind is Garden Cat therapy, and I recommend it to everybody to practice on a daily basis any time they feel in the slightest bit pissed off. Think of Garden Cat and smile internally. Okay, so now we're moving on to positive planning, and this is again a cognitive behavioural therapy, whereby we utilise an intentional sequence of events to intellectually break out of impatterned behaviour. So if we're filled with doom and gloom, if we're anxious about situations, if lots of things fill us with dread or make us less likely to engage in the world that we live in, then positive planning is one of the specific techniques that we can use to break out of this. And by positive planning, what I mean is deciding that this is needed. Having decided that it's needed, decide on something that is doable. There is no point in planning for failure. Okay, you have to plan for success. So doable could be anything from walking to the shops if you're chronically depressed and you haven't done that for months, to going to the cinema, going to the park, going and watching the boats on the river. Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter what it is. If it's something that you can even vaguely enjoy merely because it's an abstraction from what you normally do, even if that's going and watching the dead rats float down the Thames past Deptford foreshore. And the intellectual part comes with the preparation. So you prepare for this event. You decide what you're going to do. You set a time and a date sometime in the near future where you are definitely going to be able to do this. Do not prepare for failure. Prepare with certainty. So set a time, set an action which is entirely doable, that there is nothing that can possibly stand in your way of achieving that action. And then anticipate that day. Look forward to it. Think about it. Cast your mind over what you're going to do, how you're going to feel when you're doing it, how much you're looking forward to it. Do your very best to avoid any kind of negative emotions about this event. If you're filled with negative emotions, I understand that can be a very difficult thing. But if you isolate this event has nothing at all to do with the rest of your life or anything else at all. This is a technique, this is a mechanism. It's nothing at all to do with your emotional life, your physical well-being. This is just a specific event. Anticipate it. Enjoy anticipating it. This is very important. Then, having anticipated it, when the clock strikes high noon or whatever on the day that you've chosen, sometime in the near future, 2 or 3 days in advance is good, because that gives you a reasonable length to anticipate the event, but not so long as to become crushed by the anxiety of having to achieve something, a task that you've set for yourself. Then fulfillment. Do the damn thing, but don't just do it. Be fulfilled by it. Enter into it. Enter into every single little morsel of it, especially if you've been stuck in your bedroom with the curtains drawn, not answering the phone, watching fucking Jeremy Kyle all day. Go and enjoy the air. Yeah? And just be in that moment. Embrace the fulfillment of achieving the anticipated, prepared for moment. Then, having achieved that goal, go home. Reflect on what you've just done. Think about the preparation that you made. Think about the anticipation that you felt. Think about even the smallest moment of fulfillment that you experienced from that process, and reflect on how that can be impacted on every aspect of your being. So you can now begin, once you've experienced this as an action, and you've broken out of what you saw as an irresistible cycle of events, or an irresistible progression of events. Once you've broken out of that seemingly irresistible sequence with your intellect, you have created a new pathway in your brain that either didn't exist before or was so eroded it was effectively useless. And every time you use that pathway, you reinforce it, you make it stronger, you make it easier for the signal path to travel down it, you make the synapses work more efficiently. And moreover, that pathway will light up areas of the brain in the vicinity of it. So if you haven't been out for a long time, but you used to love taking your dog to the park, or you had a childhood sweetheart that you used to go to the park with, you'll suddenly find all of those memories just welling up within you and coming out of nowhere. And again, it's this remapping the brain for positivity, remapping the brain so that it bypasses the roadworks. Okay? And this is in your hands. It's been proven that the brain is not a fixed organ. The London cabbies was the one that they first discovered this on, with their hippocampus swells by over 100 times while they're learning to be a London cabbie. This was thought to be impossible. The human brain was thought to be set at 21 and eroding from thereafter. These cabbies were coming to the trade even later in life, as sort of 40-year-olds, when the brain was thought to be calcifying and diminishing. And they come along and they have exactly the same response. They use this practice, they do this thing that most people don't do, i.e. become a living map. And that by becoming a living map, the living map part of your brain, that's normally the size of a postage stamp, swells up to a fairly significant visible object. Okay, so that's positive planning. Then we've got owning emotions. You are the owner of your emotions. Nobody else imparts emotions